ideas that were brought in to protect workers or to provide a little bit of space, a little bit of a deregulated workplace. They all love it so much, those secretly funded shills and think tanks. Turns out it's actually really benefited capital, by which I mean not necessarily even people who run businesses, but people who invest the money in the businesses and then just sit back and wait for the returns to come rolling in. But hey ho, doff cap, Doug Forlock, vote Rees-Mogg. Patrick's in Bath. Patrick, what does poor mean in the UK in 2021?
Poor means not having what you need to support yourself, whether that be to feed, clothe, pay your bills, look after your children, and even get your children to school. I speak as somebody who works for Universal Credit, and I talk to claimants every day. It doesn't just mean that, it means people who have been in high-earning jobs, who, as a result of lockdown, can no longer work in those positions. People who work on contracts. I think of one claimant who works as a deep-sea diver.
Yes.
He cannot currently work. He is self-employed, therefore he has to pay the taxman. He has no income. His savings get eroded as he attempts to support himself until he no longer has savings through no fault of his own. And he comes to the state looking for help.
Yes.
And is astonished to find that help is what it is.
Astonished because partly, and I don't want to put words into your mouth, but if I were trying to work out why he would be astonished, it's because we live in a country security have been portrayed as living the life of Riley for the last 30 years.
People talk about claimants having flat screen TVs, plasma screens, Virgin. Everybody has that these days. Everyone has got a flat screen TV. I've got a flat screen TV.
I don't know if it's possible to buy a TV that doesn't have a flat screen. My recent trips to the tip or the dump, they're piled up. They're 6 feet high piles of flat screen TVs that people don't like anymore. But they'll move on to something else. You can usually get an idea of what poor British people will be denied by looking at what refugees are being denied today. So smartphones, I think, are the new flat screen TVs, aren't they?
I do talk to claimants, and one of the things I hear repeatedly is that sense of shame.
Yes.
They feel. In talking to claimants,
yes.
I'm a voice talking to them. They will never meet me. I will never see them face to face.
No.
But I get to speak to them at a most vulnerable and anxiety-inducing part of their lives. I can't know the full circumstances they live under. I do require to know information about their lives so I can find out what help I can extend to them, or Universal Credit has a capability to extend to them. And some of those conversations I am very privileged to have, and I get to talk to some incredible, wonderful people.
Well, I hope you'll allow me to say they're lucky to have you at the end of the phone. That won't be the experience for every Universal Credit applicant. And
perhaps.
I hesitate to ask you this because, again, I'm conscious of how voyeuristic it can sometimes seem, but I think we trust each other, and the massive majority of people listening to the programme trust me. So how do you define the bare minimum? When you talked at the outset of not being able to provide the basics, how do we define the basics, Patrick?
The basics, as Universal Credit determines it, is in terms of entitlements. And one could talk about how I talk about it is above the line and then below the line. Above the line, we talk about your entitlement as, say, a single claimant or as a couple. We then talk about your age. So you had a claimant, or you had a chap there who was 24.
That's right.
If he was 20, he would have received £342 per month as a 24-year-old. If he was 25, he would have earned, or he would have received £409 as an entitlement.
It's just arbitrary, isn't it?
Why there's a difference, heaven knows. We then talk about accommodation. He said his rent was not covered by universal credit. There's something called the shared room rate. If you are below a certain age, then the government determines that you should be sharing with friends, I guess.
Oh, I see. Right. And if you're not, unlucky. You better hurry up and change.
If you have housing costs, if you rent, grand. If you're on a mortgage, you find yourself, and if you don't have the wherewithal, you find yourself on a 9-month wait before the government can extend help to you. And that is an interest-free loan to cover your mortgage interest only. If you're lucky enough to live at home with mum and dad,
yes,
or what have you, then there's no housing costs that are payable in universal credit.
In the context of environmental issues, by which I don't mean green issues, I mean the environment in which we're all living, albeit that days like today, Patrick, I think we feel further apart from some of our neighbours than ever, but what are your biggest obstacles or enemies? What is it that you find most frustrating about the environment that we have created in this country with regard to the people coming to you for what they deserve, actually?
People who've paid their taxes,
yes,
their national insurance, what have you, their pride to find themselves in a situation that they didn't predict or ever expect that they would be in. I formerly worked in a salaried role,
yes,
where I was quite a high earner, and I had my little cash of savings going on, and I could budget effectively. A lot of people don't have that capacity because what comes in goes out.
yes.
They have no margin. They because of the nature of the jobs that they're working in, their own capacity to generate that safety net. You look after your own safety net until it's gone, and then you need help. But by that stage, you might be in a world of hurt. You've got credit card bills building up. You have to take the kids to school. There's after-school clubs. You might have a child who has special needs. What help is available to you? Constant stress going on in the background, and then the fear of coming to universal credit because you're proud.
And that pride is it's a hard thing to pin down, isn't it? Because well, I'll tell you, Patrick, and regular listeners to this break will know what I'm about to tell you now, is that when my late father got made redundant in the very early 1990s, and he went to the job centre, not so much because we needed the money from the social security payments, but because he wanted to find out what other training and what other avenues might be open to him. And I, as a teenager, 18-year-old idiot, was embarrassed. I felt shame, and he explained to me why he didn't. He said, this is the deal I made when I went out to work at the age of 15. And he said, not just for me, when you know I'd need a bit of help and guidance, but if you didn't have a job, if you needed help, that's the social contract, that's the bond. Would it be hyperbole to suggest that it's at breaking point, or that it has already broken?
I think it's not at breaking point. I think the next few weeks, months, years,
yes,
there may well be a reframing of that debate.
In a better way, you think?
In a more wholesome way.
Yes, I do too, actually. Well, you carry on, you're the expert.
I wouldn't describe myself as an expert.
These things are relative.
But I get to talk to a lot of people who are experts.
Exactly, same here.
If you have invested in society,
yes,
by paying your national insurance, your tax, that is a well that you have paid into. If you want to be, as the overwhelming majority of people I talk to, they want to be effective members of society. They want to pay their tax. They want to pay their national insurance. Current situation is that for a lot of people, say they're on zero-hour contracts, or they have been furloughed, or their business has closed down. And there's a headline this morning, A train company advertised 400 posts, they got 400,000 applications. The competition for people trying to find any form of work is intense.
So the challenge is to once again to look up for solutions and responsibility rather than to start biting chunks out of each other and fighting over whatever scraps are left. That's a worry as well.
There is an ethos, and this is going to sound a tad strange. Universal credit is a means-tested benefit.
Yes.
And there is an ethos there that the more you do for yourself, the more rewarded you will be. There's an element in universal credit called the benefit cap,
Yes.
Whereby there's a perception that people are raking in shed loads of money. They're not.
No, I know.
If you are working, then that benefit cap can be dismissed, depending on your circumstances, to encourage you to work more, to bring home more for yourself,
Right.
until you get to that point where you are beyond a point
Where you
universal credit
qualify for
can help
anything.
you.
Yes.
But to conceive that people are raking in heaps of shekels as a result of being on universal credit is utterly, utterly wrong.
But it's the only way you get the you get the